Good evening, YouTube. Hardball Crazy Comeback video. Tonight is the latest addition to one of my favorite series I like doing. I call the Uncommon Common. These are cards, players you'll find normally in the common bins, but if you look into the player's career, they're a little bit more than just a common player. They're pretty good players, so that's why I call them my Uncommon Commons. So next time you go through the common bins, you stop at this player and say, "Oh yeah, Derek talked about him. He's pretty good." Tonight's uh, a player, I came across his stat, a little stat on the internet. He's the only player in Major League Baseball history to play in over 2,000 career games, yet amassed less than 1,500 career hits. How does he do that? Well, he's got to be pretty good at something else, which he was. As you tell by the title of the video, he was a defensive wizard. That's what kept him on the ball team and starting every game. Which also got me thinking bigger picture and different sports and stuff. I'm not excluding football because it's way too specialized. You can't really compare them because players only play this much amount of the position, only one position, and they don't play the mass spectrum offense, defense the other sports do. In hockey, I don't know. I'm not a hockey historian, so I don't know for sure, but I imagine there is. There's a defensive defenseman is a thing where there's a defenseman. All he does is just shut down the scorers on the opposite teams. There's more offensive-minded defensemen like the Bobby Orrs and Paul Coffeys in the world, and they're more offensive-minded, a little less defensive, but they still are good defensemen. But there's a defenseman who just are shut down defensemen. But yet they don't barely score any goals. I imagine there's some of those guys in the Hall of Fame. I'm not a hockey historian. And in basketball, the obvious guy who's in the Hall of Fame, who is totally defensive minded, is Ben Wallace, who's got MVP votes and Defensive Player of the Years and so forth. Yet his career total is like 5.5, 6 points points per game for his total his career. He's in the Hall of Fame. So if this player was in this player here I'm talking about, like a baseball version of Ben Wallace or defensive defenseman, how we perceive players at different sports. I'm not saying he's a Hall of Famer, but if he was did the exact same thing in hockey, he was a defensive defenseman, he might be a Hall of Famer. Just something I think about how we perceive players and their roles in different sports and stuff like that. I know it's not always apples to apples, but it got me thinking. Anyways, back to this gentleman. Well, so I looked up his stats on Baseball Reference. I looked up the career defensive WAR stats. This is a quick, easy check. See who was the best defensive players of all time. I like Baseball Reference over Fangraphs because Baseball Reference, even though it's not perfect, Baseball Reference is more what they did do on the field, and Fangraphs what they should have done on the field. If you get what I mean. So I'm a moral person. What they actually did on the field, what they should have. Because should have is they take more variables into what the player actually did or should have done. If the players were better around them or different circumstances were better. But Baseball Reference is more about what they actually did, which is more black and white compared to the others. I think it's a more gray area. Anyways, that's why I picked defensive WAR career. I know it's not perfect. So the number one player all time in defensive WAR, no big surprise. Who do you think it is? Best defensive player of all time. It's Ozzie Smith. His career defensive WAR is 44.2. When you look up at defensive WAR, they go next stat over. They show the plate appearances they made, which is 10,000. Ozzie had over 10,700 plate appearances, but I wanted to check games played also because if a defensive Wizards are on the lineup every day just because of defense, he might be batting 8th or 9th versus a guy who's a great defensive player, might good bat, might be batting like 1st or 2nd, and over time those adds up to like 30, 40 play appearances a year, and add over years it comes out to several hundred over a career. So I just want to double check the plate appearances. Ozzie played at 2,500 career games. Number 2 all time in defensive WAR is this gentleman here I'm talking about. It's Mark Belanger, 39.5. He was the epitome of the no-hit great field. Uh, he only had like 1,213 career hits. I wrote some stats down. He won 8 Gold Gloves in the 70s, and his OPS plus, which is 100 league average, is like 68. Compare that to, if you think of 2 Hall of Famers, the modern day post-expansion Hall of Famers. You think of defensive first is Ozzie Smith and Bill Mazeroski. They're in the 80s, so he was considerably the worst hitter than those two. Yet Belanger is number 2 all time in defensive WAR. Wasn't much of a power hitter at all. He was in there just for his glove, and he won 8 Gold Gloves, and he did it on a winning team. Sometimes Baltimore Orioles won divisions throughout the 70s, like 6-7 times. The thing is also, you look at Mark career defensive WAR. Like I said, Ozzie is 44.2 and Belanger is 39.5. And WAR is a cumulative stat. You play well and do it over time, you accrue bigger WAR. So Ozzie had a WAR better than 5, roughly 4.5, 5 better than Belanger, but Belanger had only 6,600 plate appearances in 2,000 games. So Ozzie Smith had played 500 more games than Belanger did in the field. This just tells you that if you actually had the same amount, Belanger might be the all-time leader in defensive WAR. Plus, if you want to talk about another variable, Belanger played his career on dirt. Ozzie did it on AstroTurf, most of his career at least. So I'm not taking it away from Ozzie Smith, greatest defensive shortstop ever probably, but Mark Belanger was right there as the greatest defensive shortstop too, so let's not forget him. So if I cruise down the list of great defensive career WAR, next down was Brooks Robinson, 39.1, Cal Ripken, 35.7, there's Joe Tinker, 34.3. It's got me thinking, you know what? People always say, look at these pre-war guys. These guys should not be in the Hall of Fame, but look at his stats. Maybe they should be in the Hall of Fame. Take a bigger look. Aparicio, 31.8. Robert Moranville, 31.8. 30.6. Pudge Rodriguez, 29.6. Omar Vizquel, 29.5. Bobby Walls, 23.7. Of all those guys, every single one of them, except for Joe Tinker, played over 2,500 career games. And Joe Tinker played in 1,800, so Tinker was pretty good shortstop in defensive WAR. You look at he's one of the top defensive shortstops of all time. So he could have been, more deserving Hall of Famer than we actually think if you looked at his regular numbers. So Belanger kind of stands out of all these great defensive players of all time. That his defensive WAR so much greater than everybody else, and yet played in so much, like 500 less games than pretty much everybody else except for Joe Tinker. So that is my Mark Belanger. I think he should get more. I don't think he's a Hall of Famer because I don't think he hit well enough to it. But if Ted Williams had a hitting baseball Hall of Fame, if there was a defensive Hall of Fame, a Hall of Defense, I think Mark Belanger would be one of the inner circle Hall of Famers of defensive Hall of Famers, I guess you could say. But heck of a player, not great of a hitter, but you know what? He's such a great hitter. Earl Weaver put him in the lineup every day, and Baltimore won with him at shortstop, and shortstop is the most vital positions in baseball. So that's my uncommon common. A couple other side notes on this defensive WAR all-time list is that tied for 11th with big bad Bill Dahlin at 28.5 is recently retired Andrelton Simmons. He only had 4,800 plate appearances at 1,250. See, he had like a third to half, pretty close to a third, rest of these games of everybody ahead of him except for Tinker and Belanger. So that's how good of a defensive player he was. I don't know if you guys recognize that the last 10 years watching Andrelton Simmons, appreciated him, but damn, he's way up there in the WAR and defensive WAR with a lot less plate appearances. He was that good defensively. And further down the list, you look at the top defensive WAR among outfielders is Andruw Jones. He's a Hall of Famer. He'll get in the Hall of Fame soon. I don't care what he did back 3 or 4 years of career. Punish him for that. If he ended his career with illness or injury like a Puckett or a Koufax, he'd probably be in already. But he's getting tacked off and marked down because the last few years he was not very good. But to be honest, he was so good so long. He's a Hall of Famer. He's going to get in the Hall of Fame soon. He might get the Fred McGriff treatment as soon as the Veterans Committee says, no. The players like peers is like, whoa, he killed us. He's a Hall of Famer, just like Fred McGriff. Anyway, I digress there. But this is Mark Belanger, Uncommon Common, 68 tops. This is his first solo card. I go after these rookie cards of the stars of the 60s and 60s and early 70s. I don't go for the rookie dual cards. I go for the first solo cards. And so I picked this up a few years ago and had to have in my collection one of the greatest defensive players of all time. Even though he's not a Hall of Famer, he's an all-time great in a certain part of the game. So that's my Uncommon Comment. I talked long enough. Thank you for watching. Y'all have a good night.